Hello, welcome to, where are we? Where's my slide? Taxes and Retirement Live. I am your host, Andy Panko, owner of Tenon Financial. Give me a second. I want to make sure my microphone is correct. No, it's not. Here we go. That's why I couldn't hear you all. All right, this should be better now. Cool. Okay, I think you were able to hear me, but I was not able to hear you. Good. Let me see comments. Yes, howdy. Comments are working. Great. Thank you. As always, David Fultz for showing up. So 8 o'clock Eastern, Wednesday, Taxes and Retirement Live. Tonight's topic, I call it inherited RMDs just because I didn't want to put a bunch of letters on there, but it's really required minimum distributions from inherited retirement accounts. Tonight's topic will be focused mainly on traditional IRAs. Now, the rules apply more or less just the same to Roth IRAs. But I won't be making a lot of mention about employer retirement plans, 401ks, 457Bs, thrift savings plan, 401A, whatever. Yeah, I think 457, 403, whatever. A lot of these rules apply largely the same, although I can't say for sure there's not other twists and turns and excitement around the corner. Plans are allowed to have some of their own unique provisions to them. So the RMDs of those plans will be built around the chassis of what I'm talking about tonight, but I can't really speak with certainty about the specifics of the rest of those employer type plans. So anyway, tonight will be focused on IRAs. Yeah, sorry for not having my microphone set up. I was in a flurry trying to approve new members frantically before I realized it was 8 o'clock. I don't know what's happened to the group, but in terms of new members, but in the last 2 weeks, it's just absolutely exploded with the new folks joining. We were averaging, 200, 300 in a good week of new folks. The last few weeks have been like 700 to 1,000 each, and still going strong. There's already like 100 today. So I don't know what happened. Something in Facebook's algorithms, or the fact that Facebook is getting this in front of more people for some reason. Is my only reason, my only guess of what's going on. But it's been interesting to see this thing just absolutely go on a tear in the last few weeks. So we're gonna hit 20,000 people probably by the end of the night, honestly, which is crazy. Quite the monster here. Anyway, dad jokes for the evening. Where am I? Here I am. So yesterday I saw an ad that said radio for sale, $1, volume stuck on full blast. I said to myself, you can't turn that down. It's only $1 and it's stuck on 11. My wife asked me, why don't you treat me like you did when we were first dating? So I took her to dinner and a movie and then dropped her off at her parents' house. And finally, a priest, an atheist, and a rabbit walk into a bar. And the rabbit says, guys, I'm pretty sure I'm a typo. You know what I'm saying? Because you're expecting me to say rabbi probably, but I said rabbit, like with the ears and the nose, and it eats lettuce and whatever. So that's the dad jokes. This guy thinks it's funny. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Quick update on weight loss for those of you who care, even for those of you who don't care. I started in September, October, tracking my weight, trying to get down to 165 from 176.1. Was going strong at about 1.25 pounds per week average. And then, as expected, got a bit derailed when I went on vacation for a week, then went to a conference for a week back a month ago. Since I've been back, I kind of slipped into, not surprising, kind of holiday eating and drinking state of mind and mode. So my weight's kind of been flat since. I was 190. No, not 190. That would be crazy. I was 169.1, I think it was this week. So up from the 167 or whatever it was pre-vacation, but still down, noticeably from 176. So as long as I kind of maintain where I'm at now through holidays, I'm plenty happy with that. And then I usually don't have a problem kicking things in gear after New Year's, because at that point I'm so disgusted and bloated from eating so much I don't even feel like eating or drinking. So anyway, still going along well. Pants are still feeling good, fit better than they did a couple months ago. Okay, enough about that. Let me do the disclaimer, final housekeeping, and then we'll get into it. If I can just find it. Here we go. This video is only general explanations and education. It is not specific tax, legal, investment advice. Before considering acting on anything you see in this video, first consult with your tax, legal, or investment advisor, which I am not. I am just some fellow in a sort of spring-themed light sweater here tonight, telling you about dad jokes and my stalled weight loss, and talking about required minimum distributions from inherited retirement accounts tonight. Super exciting stuff. All right, I do have slides, and this is a big one. I realize RMDs is a monster topic, so I didn't want to do like RMDs period. I figured I had to kind of drill it down, make it a little more narrow and focused. So why not do inherited account RMDs? And as I was putting this together, I'm like, oh man, this is not going to be pretty. So I tried to make it as eloquent and as elegant as I can. I do have some references, some handy takeaways, and sort of flow charts to help you with this. Guaranteed, not all of this is not guaranteed, but some of this will probably be wrong. You know, I did my darndest to make sure it's accurate, and there's lots of ifs and thens, and this is definitely something that if and when you're posed with inheriting an account, put the work in then. I mean, generally, it's the custodian that has the account will walk you through what to do and when distributions need to be taken. So this is really just educational. Don't use this as your formal guide for how to make all these decisions. This should be largely right. I'm pretty confident it is, but I'm sure there's going to be some things that I don't know if you ask me questions, or maybe some of these things may even be slightly not completely accurate, but nonetheless, I did try my best to make this thoroughly accurate. So just big disclaimer, do not act on this. This is guidance. This is education. This is hopefully right, predominantly right, but I can't guarantee it because as I'm typing this out, I'm like, oh man, there's a lot here. All right. As far as questions, I mean, you can ask them. I'll probably try to wait towards the end, or if I get hung up on something and need a break from talking, I'll stop and take a look at questions. So, okay, let's get into it. Quick backdrop. So, RMD for those of you who are new to this world and this language, RMD stands for required minimum distribution. In a super high level nutshell, when you have any sort of qualified account, and qualified is just fancy IRS speak for there's some sort of tax preference or tax deferral to that account, such as a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, even an HSA is deemed a qualified account, though not quite the same basket or bucket as what we're discussing tonight. The point is, with a traditional tax-deferred qualified account like an IRA or a traditional 401k, 403b, 457, et cetera, one of the benefits is when you put the money in, you get a tax deferral. It's not really a tax deduction. You're not getting rid of the tax. You're just deferring when you pay the tax until some point later, namely when you take the money out of the account. So you don't pay tax initially when you put the money in. So that's the big selling point. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It is what it is. But that's kind of the big selling feature of tax deferral vehicles. The IRS realizes this is income that's never been taxed and they want their money at some point. So they won't let you delay and defer the distributions and recognition of income and recognition of taxes indefinitely. They make you start forcing upon you distributions, hence the name required minimum distributions. So I'll just gloss over this briefly. When it's your own account, your own IRA, your own 401k or whatever, generally speaking, you have to start taking a minimum level of distribution starting in the year you're 70, you turn 72. And then every year thereafter, you need to take out at least a certain amount. I won't get into the formula. It's a separate topic, but that's a required minimum distribution for your own account. Starts at 72. Pre-2020, it used to start at 70 and a half. What changed about 2020? There's something called the Secure Act, SECURE, which is a fancy government acronym for setting every community up for retirement accessibility. I don't know what the A stands for. Retirement enhancement, I think it is. Yeah, Act. What that did is it delayed the required minimum distribution for your own accounts from 70 and a half till 72. Those who were already 70 and a half before the end of 2019 or under the old rules, you had to have started taking RMDs already at 70 and a half. Those who were not yet 70 and a half by the end of 2019 are under the new rules. You don't have to take RMDs from your own account until you're 72. That's your own account. Tonight's topic is inherited accounts. Why am I saying this? The Secure Act also really turned upside down, shook, and dropped on its head RMDs from inherited accounts. And that's what we're talking about tonight. So unless you have specific questions or I mentioned otherwise, everything tonight is in reference to the current rules that have been in place since January 1st, 2020 under the Secure Act. Pre-2020, separate ball of wax, again, unless I specifically mention it. All right. This might be a little clunky to go through this, but there's a lot of like background and things I felt I needed to define. Why am I still talking? Let me put these slides up. Okay. So first, a little technical, but there are life expectancy. RMDs are based on your life expectancy, and there's two different. There's really three, but I'm just kind of focused on two here. There's a couple different tables that the IRS produces that have factors, basically factors that say for any given age what your assumed life expectancy is. It's those factors that are used in determining what your required minimum distribution is. One of the main tables is what's called the single life table. It's these are the factors, the life expectancy factors that are applied for RMDs when you have an inherited account, typically for non-spouse beneficiaries. Why do I draw a distinction between spouse and non-spouse? Well, if you're a spouse, you have unique abilities when it comes to inheriting accounts from your deceased spouse. You have the option to take the deceased spouse account and make it your own, as if it looks and feels like it's always been your own. And once it's made your own, it's then your account. It falls under RMDs as if it was always your account. If you so that's why I said spouses are kind of different. So they wouldn't necessarily go off this single life table, and I'll explain more about what the single life table is. The other exception is if you're a surviving spouse and you are more than 10 years younger than your spouse that's deceased, then there are times when you may use a different table called the joint life and last survivor table, which I didn't show here. That's a whole separate thing. That's another table that you would use to determine your life expectancy. Now, there is a question sent to me before this from Ariel, and she asked this question. So what if a spouse is, I think it was 10 and a half years younger than a deceased spouse? What would you use? And this is the answer, Mariel. If you don't choose to make the account your own, and you instead choose to take distributions from the inherited account based on life expectancy, you would use this joint life and last survivor table because you're more than 10 years younger than the deceased spouse. Yeah, so okay, Mary, I see you just popped up the question here. Yes, so yes, there's this joint life and last survivor table. Again, I don't have it referenced. I don't have the table shown here because it's huge. It's multiple pages. This is big matrix, but look it up. This is what would be used in that case. If you don't make the account your own, again, if you make the account your own as a surviving spouse, then it just folds into your own as if it was always your own. And you take RMDs based on your age of 72. When you have to start. If you make it an inherited account, and take RMDs based on life expectancy, this is a table you would use, joint life and last survivor. Fun fact, these tables are updated or were already updated to go into effect starting January 1st of next year, so less than a month away in 2022. And why is that? Well, I don't remember the last time they were updated. I want to say it was 10 plus years ago. But obviously, life expectancy has increased since the last decade or two when the IRS last did these tables. Life expectancies are now longer. So they revised these RMD factors starting next year to account for longer life expectancy. And I do have the tables at the end, what the single life table actually is. I will show you that, and I'll show you an example. So rest assured it's there. Plus, it's easy to you Google. You can get these things anywhere. Just Google single life table. Boom, it's going to be there. Next. The other commonly used table is the uniform lifetime table. And why am I bringing this up? Well, this is used for your own RMDs. When it's your own IRA, your own 401k, there's a separate table used for life expectancy. Don't ask me why. I don't know. This is just the way it is. So when it's your own accounts, you use what's called the uniform lifetime table, not the single life table, which is what I just talked about. I also have this table at the end so you can see it. These factors are also updated effective starting next month in 2022, again, because longer life expectancies. So I bring this up just because there is an instance as a inheritor, as a beneficiary, where you would use this. I think I mentioned that elsewhere in the slides later. But anyway, I just want to bring this up because this is another table you will come across at some point in your lifetime. So I thought it was important to mention now, even though it typically doesn't come into play for inherited accounts. Other stage to set here. It's important to know what an individual is in the eyes of an IRS and in beneficiary speak. An individual basically boils down to a living, breathing person, right? Anyone who's alive. Yeah, I think even if it's in a vegetative state, if it's a person, the Homo sapien that's not deceased is an individual. That doesn't mean you need to make an individual. You don't have to name an individual as a beneficiary of your retirement accounts. You can name anything else. You can name a trust. You can name your estate. You can name charities churches. You can name a tree. You can name your cat as a beneficiary. I don't know why you would, but you can in theory. Those are not individuals. Again, individual needs to be a living, breathing person. Everything else is not an individual, but everything else can still nonetheless be a beneficiary. You'll see why this distinction matters as we roll through this massive beast of a thing here tonight. Yeah, individual equals human. Whoever said that, thanks. Much cleaner, easier way to say it instead of me. Okay. Another big important term to know, and this is new, this is as of the Secure Act again, which went into place in 2020. Important to know, this designation did not matter pre-2020. It does matter now. There's something called an eligible designated beneficiary, of which there's only 5. Surviving spouse, the spouse of the account owner who died. A minor child, defined as any child of the decedent, the deceased, specifically where that child is younger than the age of majority. Now, I should have looked this up more. I don't know if this matters by state. Like if it was just simply younger than 18, I would think the IRS would have just said anyone younger than 18, but they defined it as younger than the age of majority. So I think age of majority is 18 in most, if not all states, but I can't say that with certainty because it's quite possible. There are some states where it's 19 or 21 or something. I don't know. But anyway, so minor child, someone who's disabled, an individual who's disabled, an individual who's chronically ill. And there are formal IRS definitions of what it means to be disabled and chronically ill. I don't have those with me, but it's not just like, oops, I broke my finger, so I'm disabled. It's like there's a definition you have to meet. I think it more or less aligns with like the Social Security definition where you're completely and totally disabled, which means, prevents you from doing any sort of gainful employment, maybe even prevents you or limits you from doing, some activities of daily living. I'm not sure. Or the fourth one is any individual who is not, and this is how it's worded, it sounds a little clunky, any individual who is not more than 10 years younger than the deceased. So think about it another way. If you're more than 10 years older, you are not an eligible designated beneficiary. So like if you die and leave your account to your grandchild is more than 10 years younger than you, hopefully. I don't think it's not biologically possible to not be more than 10 years younger. Maybe, who knows? If you leave to a child, your adult child, again, biologically, that child, I think almost has to be more than 10 years younger than you. So that child would not be an eligible designated beneficiary. But if you die and leave it to your brother or sister, who's only 3 years younger than you, that person can or is an eligible designated beneficiary. You'll see why this matters, again, as we roll through it. So any other individual, any other human who's not one of these 5 bullets, one of these 5 categories, is not an eligible designated beneficiary. Capiche? Cool. All right. Next. Ooh, went too fast. So let's start actually talking about RMDs now. We'll start with surviving spouse. Your spouse deceases, your spouse passes, you are the surviving spouse. If you are the sole named beneficiary, you have 3 options of what you can do with this account. And these 3 options have different RMD implications. Now, notice I put in big capital letters, sole beneficiary. If your deceased spouse named you and, brother Jim as 50-50 beneficiary, some of these rules now won't apply. It gets a little more technical. Your options may be limited. More on that later. But if you're commonly what happens is in a married couple, each spouse will name the other as the sole beneficiary. Now, not to say there's not other alternatives, mixed marriages, or, half go to your kids, half go to the spouse, whatever. But in cases where the surviving spouse is the sole beneficiary, here's the 3 options. One is, as I already touched on, the surviving spouse can simply make the inherited account his or her own. Once that's done, the assets from the deceased account transfer into the surviving spouse's account, and that's it. That account looks and feels as if it was always the surviving spouse's from the get-go, which means RMDs from that point forward will be treated like RMDs would have been treated anyway for your own account, which means under current legislation in the year you're 72, that's when you have to start taking RMDs out of your own account, and then every year thereafter. So that's option 1. Option 2 is what's called the stretch RMD. And for those of you who follow this and follow the industry and the news, the stretch IRA, as it's called, is what was taken away, or at least significantly reduced in eligibility with the Secure Act in 2020. So what stretch simply means is, kind of in plain English, is the person who inherits the account can stretch out the distributions of that inherited IRA over his or her lifetime. So, for example, if you die and leave it to your adult child, who's let's say you die at 80, your adult child is 55. You're under this stretch IRA that this child would have been able to do pre-Secure Act. That child could have stretched out the distributions from this IRA over his or her remaining life expectancy. So for a 55-year-old, life expectancy would have been like 30 years. So your child, when you left this IRA to your child, he or she could have stretched out, taken money for 30 years. That's what stretch means. And that went away for a lot of people, and I'll explain why. But for a surviving spouse, anyway, a surviving spouse still has the opportunity to stretch out RMDs if he or she doesn't choose to make it his or her own account, which was option 1. So option 2 is stretch it. Basically, you do not fold the deceased's account into your own. It stays as a standalone inherited IRA or beneficiary IRA, whatever your custodian calls it. And then the surviving spouse can take distributions, can take RMDs based on the surviving spouse's life expectancy. The other upside is the surviving spouse doesn't need to start taking RMDs until the deceased would have been 72, if the deceased wasn't already 72 when the deceased passed. And the RMDs you would use would come from that single life table that I mentioned before. Again, the single life table is almost always the one used for inherited accounts. There are some exceptions when you use the other one, the uniform lifetime table, I think. And as I mentioned, if the surviving spouse is more than 10 years younger than the deceased, then it wouldn't be the single life table. It would be the joint lifetime and last survivor table, which I didn't show again because it's this massive, like dozens of page table. That's the second option. Option 3 is what's called the 10-year rule. And the 10-year rule is something new that came into existence with the Secure Act last year. What is the 10-year rule, you may ask? Lest you be concerned you don't find out, here you go, the 10-year rule. It states that the inherited account must be completely distributed and emptied before December 31st of the year containing the 10th anniversary of the death of the original owner. Got that? Right. So let's go through an example. Original owner dies today, December 8th, 2021. The account needs to be emptied by December 31st of the 10th anniversary year of the person's death. So that means 10 years would be 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. By December 31st, 2031, this inherited IRA needs to be completely distributed and emptied to meet this 10-year rule. Now, along the way, there aren't technically any required minimum distributions. You don't have to take any money out within those 10 years, so long as it's all emptied by December 31st, 2031. So you can take out $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $100,000 every other year, whatever. Doesn't matter as long as it's all taken out at some point within those 10 years. So there's not technically RMDs because there is no minimum. It's simply get it all out in 10 years. So that's the 10-year rule. So just going back, these were the 3 options again for surviving spouse. If the surviving spouse was named the sole beneficiary, option 1, make the account your own. Option 2, do it based on your life expectancy, where you don't have to start RMDs until the deceased would have been 70. Option 3, Option 3 is a 10-year rule. Take it out at your leisure, so long as you empty it within 10 years. My slide says 2031. Ooh, look at that. Yeah, someone just pointed out. Thank you, whoever this was. You need to fix your slide. It says 3031. So that would be 110 years. No, it is not the 110-year rule. It is the 10-year rule. Thank you for whoever brought that up. Yeah, so I see some comments here. I won't touch on them yet. But so there, this is, I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent. There's planning opportunities around which one you may select and why. And I want to get into it. So if you're relatively young, you're a surviving spouse and you're young, you're not yet 59 and a half, let's say, and you want and need access to this money prior to 59 and a half, you wouldn't want to make it your own. Because once it's your own, like any other IRA that's your own, you can't take money out penalty free until you're 59 and a half. So if you do make it your own and you do start taking distributions prior to 59.5, not only will there be tax, as there always would be anyway, but you're going to be subject to the 10% early withdrawal penalty. If you leave it as an inherited IRA, because it's inherited, you got it because of someone's death, that waives the 10% early withdrawal penalty. So if you leave it as an inherited IRA, you're a young spouse who's only 50, then you can start taking distributions from it, from that inherited IRA, without the 10% penalty. So there's one planning opportunity. That, where if you're young, you may want to not make it your own. You may want to keep it. If you're older than 59.5, typically you just fold it into your own. There was a scenario where you might, I forget, we discussed this a few months ago in the group. I forget the other example, but there was an example where you may not, even if you're over 59.5. So we'll come back to that some other point. But anyway, these are the three options for sole beneficiary as surviving spouse of what you can do with inherited IRA. So Teresa Wood just asked, is there a 10% penalty for surviving spouse if you're under 59.5? Sort of. If you make it your own, yes, there's still a 10% penalty. If you do not fold it into your own and you leave it as an inherited IRA, no, there's not a 10% penalty. Good question. Okay, next. 10-year rule, we touched on that. Okay, so we talked about surviving spouses who were one of the 4 categories of eligible designated beneficiaries. For the other 4 categories, again, that was minor child, disabled individual, chronically ill individual, or an individual who's not more than 10 years younger than the deceased. Who's not more than 10 years younger. Those are the other 4 eligible designated beneficiaries. They have 2 options of what they can do when they inherit an account. One is they can still stretch it. So the stretch IRA isn't dead for eligible beneficiaries. They can still stretch it. Here's where it's a little technical. The option, the choice you have, this option number 1 to stretch, depends on whether or not the person who died had already reached RMD age. Technically, it's called the RMD beginning date. If the original owner was of RMD age, so died on or after the RMD start age, then you use a single life table to determine RMDs, but you don't necessarily just use your age to look up the factor. You use your age or the original owner's age, whichever one has a longer life expectancy. That's the life expectancy you would use to stretch out the distributions. Or the second bullet here, if the original owner was not yet of RMD age when he or she died, then you would use your age as the life expectancy, and you would stretch it out over your life expectancy using the single life table, which I'll show you an example of. So that's option 1. And option 1 is kind of 2 prongs. Again, was the original owner of RMD age? Yes or no. That'll dictate what, whose age, whose life expectancy you have to use in determining your RMDs. Option 2, the 10-year rule. So eligible designated beneficiaries don't have to stretch out the IRA. They can simply opt to go the 10-year route and just say, I'll take whatever I want within 10 years, as long as I empty the account within the 10th anniversary of the person's death, December 31st of the 10th anniversary of the person's death. So that's the 2 options for eligible designated beneficiaries. You all with me yet? I'm sure a lot of you already tuned out. Like, man, forget this. I'm going to go watch whatever reruns of Frasier or whatever it is you watch. A few other comments. So I don't know how often this comes up, but I thought it was worth noting. There's a lot of words here. I'll just sum it up. So if a minor child inherits your account, a minor child is an eligible designated beneficiary. As such, he or she can stretch the distributions out over his or her life expectancy. So if you're eligible, if your minor child's only 10, that kid has a life expectancy of like 70 something years. So that's a long stretch. But what happens is, once that child hits the age of majority, which again, let's assume 18, then the 10-year rule kicks in at that point. So even though the child was able to stretch based on only being 10 at the time, once that child hits 18, then from that point forward, it has 10 years for that child to fully distribute the rest of that account. So the stretch option goes away at that point. It becomes 10 years. And it's not 10 years from the child first got it. It's 10 years from the child hits age of majority, which again, we'll assume is 18, but maybe it's slightly different depending on the state. The other thing, and this is a whole other angle I didn't get into other than this, like what happens when a beneficiary dies and someone else inherits it? I frankly forgot. I think generally it's a 10-year rule kicks in this post-Secure Act world. I could be wrong. I looked this up at one point, but I forgot. But one thing I am fairly sure about as I looked it up and researching for tonight, if the eligible designated beneficiary dies prior to emptying the account, so let's assume the example again, God forbid, a 40-year-old dies and 38-year-old sibling inherits the account. That sibling is an eligible designated beneficiary because he or she is not more than 10 years younger than the deceased. That 38-year-old heir can stretch it out over his or her life, which is going to be like 45 years or whatever. If that beneficiary dies a handful of years in or whenever, from that beneficiary's death onward, that account needs to be distributed within 10 years. So if that person then leaves it to his or her child or whatever, I think it's only 10 years. I don't think this string of heirs and beneficiaries doesn't keep getting the stretch option. I'll stop there. I don't know enough. I'm far from confident on the facts of what happens when a beneficiary dies. Like, what's the distribution rules for the beneficiary's beneficiary? I knew it at one point, but I forgot, so I won't even go down that route. Question: can an eligible designated beneficiary switch from stretch to 10-year partway through and stop the RMD? Great question. I don't think so. No. I forget how this works. And this may depend on the custodian. So you have until December 31st of the year after the year of the person's death to formally decide what you're going to do. Now, I don't know what you're defaulted to. It may depend on the custodian or the plan administrator or whatever. They may assume you're going to take some sort of RMD-based life expectancy stretch route. If that's the case, you would need to tell them by December 31st of the year after the person's death that, no, I don't want to do that. I want to instead do 10-year things, so don't give me RMDs. 10-year, I'll figure it out myself. I'll empty out the account within 10 years. To your question, if you already started RMDs, and let's assume you're 3 years in to taking RMDs under a life expectancy based payout, I don't know. I don't believe you can then stop and say, nope, give me 10 years. You can always take out more than the RMDs. So like if you wanted to empty the account, then you can. The R in RMD stands for, no, I'm sorry. The M in RMD stands for minimum distribution. You need to take out at least that much, but no one's going to stop you from taking out the account in full whenever you want. Just know that's going to be taxable, especially if it's a regular traditional IRA. So you can always take more than the RMDs, but I don't think you can start taking RMDs 3 years in and be like, no, I'm done. I want to take 10 years and then take nothing for 7 years and take the rest. I don't believe that's allowed. Yeah, good question. All right, you still with me? I'm not with me with this. This stuff is hairy. All right, next. Other individuals, so not surviving spouse and not one of the other 4 classifications of eligible designated beneficiary. What are the RMD rules for them? Simple, 10-year rule, period, done. So example would be, you die, you leave this to your 50-year-old, your 70s, 80s, whatever, 90s. You leave this to your 50-year-old child. Your 50-year-old child is not an eligible designated beneficiary, but he or she is an individual. His or her only option is the 10-year rule. He or she cannot stretch it. He or she cannot do an RMD, a life expectancy based thing. He or she has 10 years to empty it. Full stop. No ifs, ands, or buts. This is what the stretch IRA option died, was taken away for these folks. These people cannot stretch it out over their lifetime. They have to empty it in 10 years. This was the buzz. This was the clickbait news when the Secure Act came out, that the stretch IRA is dead. It's dead for these people. It's not dead for everyone else. It's not dead for surviving spouses and those other 4 eligible designated beneficiaries. So this is something, I don't know why I care, but I don't like clickbait. The headlines that stretch IRA is dead. No, it's not. Stop. Be quiet. It's taken away for a lot of people, but not everyone. Anyway, these are the people it's taken away from. Other individuals who aren't eligible designated beneficiaries. So pretty straightforward with them. Next, RMDs who are not individuals. So you leave your IRA to a trust, to an estate, to your church, to a company, to your dog, to whatever, to your refrigerator. And I say that just because I'm looking at my refrigerator in the background. I like it, but I wouldn't leave it money. So what are RMDs for in the hands of a non-individual? Well, there's two options. I don't know why I didn't do 1 and 2 for this. Sorry. Oh, never mind. They don't have a choice. That's why. So there are two different ways RMDs may play out for a non-individual. They don't have a choice. It's simply a function of whether the original owner was already of RMD age, yes or no. If the original owner was already of RMD age, then the non-individual, the entity, the company, the tree, the whatever, needs to take RMDs based on the life expectancy of the owner, using the single life table, the factors from the single life table. If the original owner was not of RMD age when he or she died, then the non-individual has to use what's called the 5-year rule. You can probably figure out what that means. It's the same as the 10-year rule, except it's 5 years. The account has to be emptied by December 31st of the 5th year after the year of the death of the individual. So that's non-individuals, and again, entities like trusts, estates, houses, cars, church, whatever. What else do I have here? Other random, not random, these are important comments, but other comments about RMDs. And I didn't know where to put these, so I just kind of stuffed them at the end. I see some of you already started to or mention some of these. So RMDs, if you select one of the options that has RMDs, life expectancy based RMDs, don't need to start until the year after the year of the person's death. That's why I said before, when you inherit an account, you have until December 31st of the year after the person's death to make a decision, because that's when that first RMD is due if you choose to take the RMD route. If you don't, and you take the 10-year route or whatever, then fine, but you need to make that decision by December 31st of the year after death, because that's when the first RMD would be due if you chose an RMD option. If the original owner was of RMD age when he or she died, if the person did not yet take their RMD prior to their death, that RMD needs to be taken post-mortem, posthumously, out of that account, because that RMD still needs to be met. Just because they die doesn't mean their RMD goes away, unfortunately. RMDs can be varied in installments, etc. It does not need to be a single annual amount. For example, if your RMD from an inherited account is $10,000, you do not have to take a single slug of $10,000 for the year. You can take $1,000 one month, $2,000 the next month, $1,000 the next month. As long as you take at least $10,000 out throughout the course of the year, the RMD will be satisfied. You cannot commingle next point. You cannot commingle RMDs from inherited accounts with your own accounts. Fun fact, well, not so fun, but fact, when you inherit an RMD from someone, yes, you may think the account's yours. It shows up on your statements. You're the one taking the money out of it, but it's not technically yours. The account, the assets, are still that of the decedent, the person who died. You're just simply the recipient of the income from that account. Wrap that around your head, or wrap your head around that. For that reason, it's not truly your account. It's not, it's still the decedent's assets. Technically, you're just getting income from it. Because it's not fully yours, you can't commingle, the RMD requirements from your inherited account with your own IRAs. So whatever your RMD is from the inherited, it has to be taken from the inherited. Whatever your RMD is from your IRA or IRAs, you can take your RMD from any one of those IRAs to satisfy that collective RMD requirement. You cannot use an excess from one to meet the other. The exceptions are if you're the surviving spouse and you make the deceased person's IRA your own, then it does truly fold into your own as if it was always your own. But if it stays as its own kind of ring-fenced inherited IRA, you cannot mix and match RMDs with your own accounts. If for whatever reason you happen to have multiple IRAs you inherited from the same decedent, then you can mix RMDs just within those inherited IRAs, because those are all assets of the same person. So they can be used to collectively satisfy RMDs amongst themselves, but they can't, again, cross over into your own. You cannot do a Roth conversion from an inherited IRA, because that's not yours technically, into one of your Roth IRAs, because that is yours. Again, there's this wall, not yours, yours. Inherited accounts are not yours. You're just the recipient of its income. So you can't do a conversion from an inherited IRA into your own Roth IRA. However, and I don't know why this is the case, but you can do a Roth conversion from an inherited 401k into your Roth IRA. Beats me, whatever, is what it is. So is Andy's office in his kitchen, or does he have a beer fridge in his office? Yeah, Andy has a beer fridge in his office. Here we go. Look at that. Little fridge, little microwave. There's more than beer in it, but yes, there is some beer in that fridge. And this is my office, Mark. Great question. It is not my kitchen. Where was I? Okay. So yes, can't do conversions from an inherited account into your own Roth IRA. Next. Other comments. Qualified charitable distributions can be done from inherited IRAs, but you need to be 70 and a half, not the person who died. Doesn't matter what age they died. You, if you're over 70 and a half and have an inherited IRA from someone, you can do qualified charitable distributions from it. This one's interesting. This is a little technical. So the way these beneficiaries work is person dies this year, he or she has a beneficiary or beneficiaries named on his or her IRA. It's not until September 30th of the next year that these beneficiaries are finalized. And then once they're finalized, then by December 31st of that next year, that's when the first RMD needs to be taken if the people are going the RMD route. So why does this matter? Here's why it matters. So let's say you die, you leave your IRA to your three kids equally. And let's assume your kids are, I'm just making this up to make an extreme example, 20, 40, and 50. If there's a single inherited IRA that's opened and the RMDs, this is a bad example because they're not eligible for RMDs. You know what? Forget I'm saying this, because this is more meaningful pre-Secure Act. Now after Secure Act, this is kind of less of a concern. But point is, September 30th of the year after death is when like the beneficiaries are finalized for the decedent's IRA. There's planning opportunities to get around some things. Like if you're a beneficiary, you don't want or need the money, and you'd rather go to your little brother, you can disclaim it. You can say, no, I don't want it. I don't need it. Take me off. I know I was named as a beneficiary, but I pass. Give my share to the other beneficiary, who's my little brother. You can do that as long as that's done by September 30th of the year after the person's death. You can disclaim. You can also rejigger, meaning like the person who died had one IRA. Let's assume there's three beneficiaries. There doesn't need to be one inherited IRA that pays out to three beneficiaries. That inherited IRA can get split into three, as long as so each beneficiary gets his or her own separate inherited IRA. As long as that's done by September 30th of the year after death, you can do that. I'll stop there. Yeah, I'm afraid to go where I was trying to go, because it's less of an issue now in the Secure Act world. So anyway, I put this together kind of frantically trying to make these slides, so I didn't quite think this one through before I typed it. What's next? All right, quick example for you all. An example of an eligible designated beneficiary. Here's the example. Jane dies in 2021. She's 60 years old. Her sole beneficiary is her brother John, who's 58 this year. Because he's not more than 10 years younger than Jane, John is an eligible designated beneficiary. So he can elect to stretch out the RMDs. He does not have to use the 10-year rule. He can still do the stretch. He can base the RMDs from this account based on his life expectancy. His first RMD won't be required until next year, the year after the year of the person's death. And because Jane was only 60, she was not of RMD age herself. There's no RMD that need to have been taken this year because Jane wasn't, 72. So John doesn't need to take the first inherited account RMD until next year. Next year, John will be 59. Again, he's 58 this year, so he'll be 59 next year. So you would use the single life table, and we'd look up what the factor is for someone who's 59. And let me just, I'll jump ahead quick. I do have the tables here, and I put both of them. So again, they're changing effective next year. These are the factors that are in place up until next year. So if you're taking the RMD this year under the single life table, these are the factors you need. If you're taking an RMD next year, you want the post 2021 tables. These are the factors you would use. So in our example, I don't know if you all can see this, but John will be 59 next year. This factor is 28.0. This is the factor. This is the life expectancy factor John will need in taking his RMD next year. Let's put this to work and show you what it actually does. So the RMD factor, again, is 28.0 next year when John will be 59. His RMD will be the December 31st, 2021 balance, this year's ending balance, divided by the RMD factor of 28.0. That's going to be his RMD for next year, 2022. So let's assume the December 31st, 2021 balance of this inherited IRA is $100,000. Divide that by 28.0. Next year, John will need to take out, at a minimum, $3,571.43. That is John's RMD next year. Every year thereafter, that RMD factor of 28.0 simply gets reduced by 1. So in 2023, the factor will be 27. In 2024, it'll be 26. In 2025, it'll be 25. Oh, look at that. In 2025, the factor will be 25. Ain't that interesting? And then 24, 23, 22. It'll go down by 1 every year. So in 2023 now, just to show this math, we would, again, reduce the original factor by 1. So the factor was 28.0. It'll then be 27.0 in 2023. You'll need the December 31st, 2022 account balance. Divide that by 27.0, and that'll be 2023's RMD of $3,518.52. And you simply do this exercise every year going forward. Reduce the factor by 1 every year. Divide it by the prior December 31st balance. That's your RMD. You keep doing that until RMDs run out. You can do the math. If in 2022, the factor is 28, and that factor goes down by 1 every year, that means in 28 years, the factor's done. There's no more math to do. The account will need to be emptied by that point. I guess technically you're dividing by 0, which doesn't work. But point is, these RMDs will be depleted in 28 years. You can't stretch them out more than that. You can always take out more if you want, again, but you need to take out at least these minimum amounts that I just walked through. Okay. What else do I have here? So here's the actual tables for those of you who are interested. Again, you can Google these and find these anywhere. Don't get hung up feeling like you need to look at these or print these or whatever. I just simply dumped them into Excel. I do plan on making a free handout at some point, a table that'll be on my website that people can download this stuff instead of having to go dig through YouTube and find this presentation. But these are the single life table factors used up through this year. Starting next year, you want to use these factors, and again, these are adjusted to reflect larger life expectancies since the last time these tables were updated. And then if you're interested, here's a uniform lifetime table. Again, these are used in determining RMDs for your own accounts, not inherited accounts. And I didn't put it in this presentation, but I said there was one example I was aware of where you would use the uniform lifetime table as a beneficiary. I don't know if I got that wrong or if I simply forgot to put it in or if it was such a not likely to happen scenario that I didn't bother. So maybe you can disregard this table for purposes of tonight's presentation because this is focused on inherited accounts. And the math and process is different for these. And I won't get into it because I'll further confuse people tonight. I already feel like I threw around enough mumbo jumbo tonight. But anyway, so these are tables you use for RMDs this year for your own accounts. Starting next year and years thereafter, you would use these tables instead. Now, to help boil this down, I saved the best for last. There's lots of ifs, thens, and whatever. I do have on my website, tenantfinancial.com/free-resources. Free to download. You don't have to put in your email or nothing. Those of you who know me know I don't like lead capture. I don't like asking things of you like names and phone numbers. Just click it. It's there. There's no gatekeeper. There's a whole host of stuff on this website, on my website. The two specific to tonight, one is this chart that says, should I inherit my deceased spouse's traditional IRA? This is the decision chart you can use to help you walk through the decision making of, when did my spouse die? How old is he or she? How old am I? What are the options I have for taking this? And this will help walk you through. For non-spouses, there's another chart called Can I Delay Distributions from the Traditional IRA I Inherited? Same sort of process. Start at the beginning, just walk through these yes/no questions. Will guide you to kind of the next thing. Thank you for whoever this was. Yeah, this is the link to where you can find all this stuff. There's a treasure trove of goodies on that site. I'm a little biased because I put the stuff there, but it really is great stuff. Again, none of which requires names, emails, nothing. Just click on it and there you go. So I know tonight is a lot of confusing, a lot of info to digest. This will help you think through it. But again, RMDs, really complicated. Don't rely on tonight's presentation as the end all be all. If and when you're approached, you have life circumstance such that you inherit an account, talk with the custodian behind it. Talk with an advisor if you have one. Talk with your tax professional if he or she is willing and able to give advice like this. Don't just rely on my charts. Big caveat: don't just rely on these charts in this presentation. Hope this helps you. Hope this educates you, but don't let this be the definitive source of where you get RMD info, because there's a lot of moving parts to this stuff. Do I have anything else here? No, I don't. That's it. Just other comment. So this was traditional IRAs I talked about. Roth IRAs, the RMD rules are the same if you inherit a Roth IRA. The big difference is the taxability of it. That's the only real difference. You're a sharp bunch in this group. With your own Roth IRA, there are no RMDs on your own Roth IRA. You never have to take money out of it. When you inherit a Roth IRA, there are RMDs. You do need to take money out. The process and rules for what those RMDs are and what your choices are the same as what we just walked through tonight. They apply just the same. So keep that in mind. Again, taxability is different. Almost certainly you're not going to have any tax on any of these distributions, whereas traditional IRAs, there will be. At least some of the distributions will be taxable. Roth IRA is probably not the case, but the rules around when you have to take money out is the same. Employer plans. Again, 401ks, 403bs, 457, 401a, thrift savings plan. Largely the same process, but each plan could be different. So one example, 401k, you're the one who worked there. You retired, you have a 401k there. You left at the old employer. You die. Your spouse is the named beneficiary. 401k administrators don't necessarily want to be in the business of record keeping and administering plans for people who aren't even there anymore, especially people who deceased and now a spouse took the account over. So it's relatively common, I think, that 401ks will force you, the beneficiary, to take this account out, like move it to an IRA. I don't know what timeline they give you or whatever, but the point is the plan can make you move it to an IRA. So you have to check with each plan. And Mario, I know you had a question about 457B. I frankly don't know. I think largely the process is the same, but you have to check with the specific plan and administrator to see what the options are upon death of the spouse, the original plan holder, to see what you can or can't do with that account, what they require. They may even allow, or they may even require different RMDs. So when it comes to employer plans, they don't need to use the same rules as the IRS. The rules can be no more liberal than the rules from the IRS, but they can be more punitive or conservative. So for example, the IRS requires you to take distributions from your accounts when you hit 72. Where am I going with this? In theory, I don't know that any plan does this, but in theory, a plan can require you to take distributions prior to 72. And well, I'm just thinking out loud here. That's in the case of you, the plan holder. When it comes to a beneficiary, because the plan holder died, I wouldn't doubt there's other provisions they can put in there that are different from what we talked about today. They may force upon you more RMDs or RMDs sooner, perhaps. So you really have to check. So that's my blanket caveat. I can't really get into employer plans because I don't know enough about them, and I think they can all be slightly different than what we talked about here for IRAs. All right, I'm done with the slides. Let me go to questions. Man, it's already 9. For you East Coasters, it's almost 9. Let's see, just going back, I'll take this share off. Let me go start looking at questions, comments. I don't even know what this means. Eat an apple before parties. I like it. Okay. Or have a few beers before parties. Okay, sorry. So just going back here, looking for comments, seeing when they first started. Your age, what's this? Your age for the computation is based on whatever age you turn in the year in question. So for example, they're 10 years apart and don't get to use that joint table. I guess this was in response to someone else. Yep, exactly. So the Mark Troutman, the not more than 10 years younger was meant primarily for siblings. That's right. Eligible designated beneficiaries, if you're within 10 years younger of the person who deceased, you can stretch out your RMD still. Yes, Mark, this was one of the planning opportunities. If you're younger than 59 and a half, as we mentioned, you don't have the penalty-free access to it if you make the inherited IRA your own, if you're the spouse. So you may want to keep the inherited IRA. And then I think down the road, you can subsequently later turn it into your own when you do hit 59 and a half. So good comment. Okay. Someone asked, Dave Fultz, can you convert inherited RMD to a Roth? No, you cannot. Touched on that. Oh man, I see there's a spammer in here. Someone put a spammer. I won't give them the justice of showing their comment, but there's a spam about making money and contacting Barbara C. Anderson. This is what happens when the group is growing this fast. It's that much more difficult to screen out these fake profiles and these bots and these Russian hackers and whoever else this is and Bitcoin scammers, and I don't even know what they are. Sorry about that. Some riffraff does inevitably slip through the cracks. We can't screen them all. Where else are we? Yeah, this was in response to someone else, but custodian doesn't require a formal declaration of which method you choose when you inherit an account. If you start with a stretch, then decide to stop for a year, now you've effectively switched to 10 years. Interesting. I don't. Oh, I see what you're saying. So maybe you can. So this, I don't know who posted this, but maybe the implication is the IRS. I don't know if I agree with this. I'm not saying it's wrong, but how would the IRS know? So if you do have an RMD because you selected the RMD option and you miss that RMD, is there 50% penalty? How would the IRS know if you start with RMDs and then stop and decide you want to finish up with the 10-year rule? How would they know that you didn't miss an RMD? Is it just the honor system for you to tell them? That's interesting. I don't know the answer to this. Whoever posted this, I'd be curious to know more about this. Right, is a good comment too. So custodians usually do provide RMDs. I haven't seen cases where they don't. I'm sure it happens, but whether it's your own account or it's an inherited account, custodian usually will calculate it for you. It's simple math. They have all the info. They can easily do it. They'll usually calculate it, and you can often set it up to have them automatically distribute it to you if you don't already take it out, by a certain point in the year. But it's ultimately your responsibility. Don't rely on the custodian. Now, with that said, if the custodian does report it and they mess it up and therefore you take the wrong RMD, you almost certainly can get a waiver of the 50% RMD penalty the IRS would otherwise impose. That's kind of a one-time thing. You can blame the custodian once if it is legitimately the custodian's fault. But in subsequent years, you can't keep relying on that get out of jail free card because the custodian messed up. No, you should know better by that point, and the IRS won't keep granting you the waiver. But generally, yes, custodians will report your RMD and may even auto send it to you if you ask them to. Can I list my minor 4 grandchildren as my beneficiaries? They would be in a lower tax bracket than my 2 kids, and does that make sense? You definitely can. What I don't know is, yes, I think they'd be able to use the stretch up until they're 18 or whatever the age of majority is in their respective states. Then it's 10-year distribution from that point forward, because the 10-year rule would start. And yes, they would be in a lower tax bracket. Now, what may complicate things is the kiddie tax. And I don't know where this stands. This was like revised and revised again in the last couple of years, maybe just temporarily. But kiddie tax is basically something that comes into play if minors have more than a certain amount of unearned income for the year. And I want to say it's only like $2,000 or maybe $4,000. It's not a lot. It's a few $1,000s. If they have more than a few $1,000s of unearned income, so dividends, interest, capital gains, and I believe inherited IRA distributions qualify just the same. If they have more than a few $1,000s of unearned income, then they're taxed at their parents' tax rates, which are going to be higher logically than the grandchild, than the minors. And this is intentional. This is because the IRS knows, the IRS is onto this. They're thinking the same thing that you are. My grandkids are in low tax brackets. Let me leave them my money. They're not going to pay a lot of tax. IRS is like, well, not so fast. So if they do get more than a few $1,000s of unearned income, the kiddie tax applies, which again is they're then taxed at the parents' tax rates. So you may not be saving much, if anything, from a generational, tax savings point of view by doing this, but I'm not 100% certain. Again, kiddie tax rules were changed a bit or temporarily relaxed. So you'd have to look more into that with, whoever your tax person is and find out. But that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think the strategy is as glorious as it seems on the surface. Yeah, fridge tour. There's really not much. A few drinks, waters. I'm big into honey green tea. I do have some beers in there. I don't drink. I brought them in because it was novel when I first got to this office. It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring beers to my office. I haven't had one since I've been here in April, but they're there. If I want them, they're there. I have some hot sauce. I have some buffalo sauce. I have some frozen burritos. I think I have some seltzer. That might be it. And I had an apple in there, but I ate it. Okay. Yeah, whoever this is, sorry, beat me to it. So yes, stretch only up until they're 18, and then kiddie tax applies. Yep. If my 92-year-old mom has never taken out any RMDs and she dies tomorrow, my brother and I still be liable for the taxes and penalties that she never dealt with. That's a good one. I mean, it's not a good scenario, but yeah, I don't know. My thought, and I'm just making this up. My thought process is in the year of her death, someone will have to fill out for her final year tax return. And the right answer is probably that, or the best answer, cleanest answer is probably that in doing that final year tax return, they'd have to, wow. They'd probably have to amend like every prior year's tax return to take the RMDs that should have been taken but weren't. Because any year you have an RMD and don't take it, there's a 50% penalty on the amount of RMD that should have been taken and wasn't. Now, like I said, there are waivers. Like if you can prove it wasn't your fault or you didn't know better, then there is a one-time get out of jail free card for, I didn't know I had to take RMDs. That works once. I don't know what would happen here if there's 20 plus years of missed RMDs. I don't know if the IRS will grant like a sweeping waiver of all of the penalties. I think your mom's final tax return should still take all those missed RMDs. I don't even know how you go back and figure that out. You have to go through 22 years of tax records, man. I don't know. The right answer is someone should be liable to pay those. I would think it would be your mother's estate in doing her final tax return. I don't know that it's directly passed on to you two, but in theory, if your mom or your mom's estate didn't take it, then I would guess you two have to take it, or at least it would come out of your mom's, tax deferred assets before you get what's left. I really don't know. That's an interesting one. Can you disclaim just a portion of the inherited IRA, or is it all or nothing? And can you disclaim it to the beneficiary of another relative that is not already a beneficiary of that IRA? I don't know the first portion. It may be all or none. I don't know. But I'm pretty confident you cannot disclaim it to someone who's not already named a beneficiary on it. Because that would go against the grain of it. It wasn't your account to decide who to leave it to. So you can't say on behalf of the person who died, no, it really should have went to, Joe Smith instead of me and Jane Smith, who were the named beneficiary. So I'm fairly confident you can't name someone else who's not already on it. I just don't know if you can disclaim some of it as opposed to all of it. Let's see what Mark Troutman says. You can disclaim a portion, but the remainder will only go to the other named beneficiaries. You cannot name another person. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to disclaim just a portion, but I can definitely see why you can't name another beneficiary who's not already on there. Will those already taking RMDs on inherited IRAs impacted by life expectancy tables? Yes. Exactly, definitely. Your RMDs starting next. Oh, right, man. I looked this up. This was a weird one. Short answer is yes. The long answer is I could be wrong. I looked this up, and I think the answer is what you have to do starting next year, 2022, when these new tables go into effect. I think you have to go back and look at what the 2022 factor would have been in the year you started your RMDs, and then backtrack and -1 from that for every year that's since passed. So for example, the person you got this IRA from died in 2015. So you started taking RMDs in 2016. So you would have looked at your life expectancy factor for your age in 2016. And let's assume it was 25 at the time. Now, fast forward 6 years, it'll be 2022. So you've been taking RMDs all the while, except maybe last year because you didn't have to, but you were taking RMDs. You still need to take an RMD this year. You'll still take an RMD next year. But next year's RMD, what I think happens is you look at what that factor would have been. Let's assume you were 50 when you inherited it when you started RMDs in 2016. And the factor is 25, like I said. I'm making that up. I don't know if it's right, but let's assume it's 25. So now starting next year, you have to go back and say, what is the factor on the new table for a 50-year-old? And let's assume now it's 26. So what you would have to do is you'd retroactively assume the factor is 26 in 2016. So you'd have to subtract 1 every year. So subtract 1 for 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. So you'd have to subtract 6 from 26. And now your RMD factor for 2022 is going to be 20. Probably should have had a whiteboard to do that. But you follow what I'm saying? I'm not 100% confident, but I'm fairly sure that's how the revisions are going to go into place for people who are already taking RMDs. But everyone's going to be impacted by these new RMD tables, and this is how that impact is going to work, I believe. Don't quote me, but I think that's the process. If a beneficiary is a non-spousal, non-child to an inherited IRA, can they gift the RMD to their children? You talked about not being able to commingle inherited RMDs and personal accounts. Sort of. No, but sort of. So you still need to take the RMD. It's taxable to you. If you take $10,000 out as RMD, that's $10,000 on your tax return that you have to pay tax on. So in that sense, no, you cannot directly gift it to your kids and let them pay tax on it. The reason why I say sort of is once that cash is in your account, after you took the RMD, cash is cash. It's fungible. Whether you got cash from the RMD, whether you got cash from wages, whether you got cash from lottery winnings, you can do whatever you want with it, including gift it to your kids. So you can take the distribution, or you have to take the distribution. You have to be the one to pay a tax on it. But sure, the after-tax proceeds that are now sitting in your bank account, you can do what you want with, including gifting that cash to your kids. But it's really two separate things. You take the RMD, then you can choose to make a gift to your kids, but you can't directly gift the RMD to your kids. Does that make sense, Charlotte? That's a good question. Yeah, this is always the answer when it comes to employer plans. If you want to learn specifics about your employer-sponsored retirement plans, such as 401k, 403b, ask for a copy of the SPD summary plan description. This will detail out the provisions and uniqueness of your plan. If that fails and you can't find what you're looking for, simply call up your plan administrator and ask. Do you have to take RMDs from a stretch inherited IRA earlier in the year than prior to doing a Roth conversion with my non-inherited accounts at the same time? Do you have to take the RMDs from a stretch inherited IRA before doing Roth conversions from my non-inherited accounts that same year? No. Unrelated. No, unrelated. Done. Okay. Yeah. Spammer was destroyed. Awesome. I guess this might be Cody responding. Cool. What happens to the IRA if you don't have any designated beneficiaries? Oh, yeah, good one. It goes, oh, yeah, look at that. Mark Troutman, all over it. Like stink on duty, all over it. If no beneficiary is listed, it will go to your estate upon death and subject to probate. That's exactly right. By default, anything that doesn't have a named beneficiary just gets dumped into your estate. Your estate is a non-individual. So your estate will have to, distribute it under the 5-year rule, or if you were of RMD age, they'll have to take RMDs, over your life expectancy. But the estate's going to close itself out within a year or whatever. So in practice, in reality, they're just taking the entirety of your IRA as a distribution. Now, here's why you don't want to do that. We've talked about this before, about the potential drawbacks of leaving any tax deferred account to a trust or to your estate. Your estate is not an individual. Estates have different tax rates than individuals do, and they're really punitive tax rates. For example, an estate gets to the 37% tax bracket after only like $13,000 of income, whereas an individual gets to the 37% tax bracket after hundreds of thousands of dollars of income. And keep this in mind, always keep this in mind. Tax deferred accounts are not assets, they are income. They are income that has not yet been taxed. So don't view it like an asset, view it as not yet taxed income. If you leave that not yet taxed income to an estate, the estate will be the one that has to distribute and realize and pay tax on that income. And the estate will pay tax, basically 37% tax on effectively all of your IRA distribution. So if at all avoidable, do not leave your IRA to your estate. Name an individual, whether it's, parent, spouse, sibling, child, random stranger, whatever. Taxes will be lower and more efficient if you leave it to them as opposed to leaving it to your estate. And to this poster's question, if you don't name anyone, by default, I'm fairly certain your IRA gets left to your estate and your estate takes out the distributions, pays the tax on it. That's not cool. Good question. Oh, wow, 9:13. This one's smoking. Where else? We'll wrap this up fairly soon here. I wonder how many taxpayers have actually paid the 50% penalty. Do it right, but the IRS seems pretty reasonable when requesting a waiver. That's exactly right. They are reasonable in the waivers. Again, you can get a waiver if you didn't know, but you can only kind of use that once. You can get a waiver if the custodian messed up, but you can only kind of use that once. So I don't know how many people actually pay. The IRS can pretty easily find it, I think, through computer matching, because they get Form 5498 from your IRA custodians. And on that, it'll have the year-end account balance. I don't even know if it says RMDs, but it'll have year-end account balance. The IRS can easily do the math in the computer to figure out what your RMD should be. Then it'll look to see that you took a distribution of at least that much. And if you didn't, that should be pretty easy for the IRS to auto flag it and send you a what's called, I think, a CP 2000 letter saying, hey, we think you missed an RMD. You got to pay a penalty. So don't miss RMDs if at all avoidable. But if you do miss it, there is a fairly liberal, generous waiver process to get out of the penalty. Do distributions to grandchildren count against financial aid for school? Yeah, I do not know. I would assume so. I'm far from a college planning expert. I know someone is. My friend John Munley, for any of you interested, Munley. That's his wheelhouse, just like mine, is IRAs and taxes and stuff. I'm not a education planning guy. He is. So good question for him if anyone's interested, or if anyone's looking for a college funding focused advisor, John Munley. I think it does. So this will be income. This is income to the child. Child income, to my knowledge, does count against them on the FAFSA form, the Federal Aid Financial Something Something form, FAFSA. So yes, presumably it would count against them. Oh, look at that. Mark Troutman. Man, you are on fire. And Fuego, yes, it will be considered income to the child. Thank you, Mark. And Mark looked it up. Inherited IRA distributions are unearned income and are subject to kitty tax rules. So whoever posted that question, yes, it looks like you wouldn't get much tax savings, if any, by leaving it to your kids, to your grandkids, especially if their parents are high income individuals and already in high tax brackets, because kitty tax rules will apply. Oh, look at this. Okay, so here you go. It is income to the student. It's counted at 50% towards expected family contribution in the FAFSA form. Okay. This was in response to the 92-year-old mother didn't take RMDs. I figured that was a tough question. My mom honestly did not know she had to. Hopefully the IRS would grant her that one special get out of jail card and hopefully not charge her 50%. My suspicion is they would. I don't think they'd limit it to 1 year waiver. This is a one instance waiver, but I would think they'd waive it for all 20 plus years, because the reason for her not taking it was the same. She didn't know, no one told her, which in my opinion is defensible. So they should waive it. But anyway, okay. And Teresa, thank you. So I guess Teresa was confirming what I thought about how 2022 RMDs will be treated under the new single life tables. All right, that's it. Looks like questions stopped. So this is the second to last Tax and Retirement Live of the calendar year. Next week is the last one. Next week will be another mailbag. So ending up the year with mailbag. Then the last 2 weeks of the year, there will not be any. And be on the lookout for announcement and schedule of next year. I am woefully behind in getting stuff on the content calendar for that. But basic structure is going to be there before a month. In months where there's 5 Wednesdays, I'm not doing a 5th one. So there's only going to be 4 a month. The first of every month is going to be mailbag. Second of every month is going to be the group's own Cody Garrett will be running his own show one Wednesday every month, second Wednesday of the month. Third Wednesday of every month is going to be a special guest. Fourth Wednesday of every month will be me doing a deep dive into a particular topic, as I did tonight. So that's going to be the rough structure of Tax and Retirement Lives next year. Hope y'all enjoy it. That's it. I will stop talking for tonight. Thank you all for joining. Have a great week, and I will see you next week for the mailbag for the final installment of Taxes and Retirement Live for 2021. Take care. Thank you.